we're gonna kill it. No disrespect to any spirits still trying to find their way into the light. I'll figure out a place and we'll go first thing in the morning. And hello once again, we're going to hit you up with another presidential election. This one, the election 1904, Teddy Roosevelt going for a full term in his own right. What? We're going to explain that in this election right now. Now we're going to start off with the incumbent party, and that is the Republican Party, the incumbent President Teddy Roosevelt of New York. He ascends to the presidency at the age of 42 on September 14th, 1901, 8 days after President William McKinley is shot by a Polish-American anarchist named Leon Czolgosz at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York, and his death elevates Teddy Roosevelt to the presidency. He's the youngest president in American history at the age of 42. He uses the years 1902 and 1903 to gain control of the party to ensure his nomination for a full term, but a Dump Roosevelt movement by conservatives within the party that denounced Teddy Roosevelt as a radical, a dangerous radical, was hoping for the nomination of Senator Mark Hanna of Ohio. But he dies in February of 1904, so Teddy Roosevelt is really not opposed to the nomination, and he receives it. Now, as a consolation prize, the conservatives have the right to choose his vice president, and that running mate's going to be Charles W. Fairbanks, a senator from Indiana, as his running mates. So we have our Republican ticket of Teddy Roosevelt and Fairbanks. The Republican platform insisted on a maintenance of the protective tariff, calling for increased foreign trade, pledged to uphold the gold standard, favored expansion of the merchant marine, promoted a strong navy, and praised in detail Teddy Roosevelt's foreign and domestic policies. Now, let's go to the Democrats. Now, both Grover Cleveland and William Jennings Bryan decline the Democratic nomination. So, with the two Democratic nominees of the last 2 decades out of the picture, the Democratic field is left pretty much wide open. Now, the list of candidates are going to end up being the Chief Judge of the New York Court of Appeals, Alton B. Parker, New York Congressman William Randolph Hearst, Missouri Senator Francis Cockrell, Richard Olney of Massachusetts, Edward C. Wall of Wisconsin, George Gray of Delaware, Mississippi Congressman John S. Williams, and Nelson A. Miles of Massachusetts. At the end of the day, it is going to be Alton Parker who receives the nomination for president. He is a Bourbon Democrat, so the Bourbon Democrats looking like are coming back into the picture, with Bryan not wanting the nomination, and neither does Cleveland want the nomination. He's going to bring along for the right Henry G. Davis of West Virginia as his running mate. Davis is 80 years old. He remains the oldest candidate to ever be nominated for any office, president or vice president. Now, the Democratic platform calls for the reduction in government expenditures and a congressional investigation of the executive department's already known to teem with corruption, condemned monopolies, pledged an end to government contracts with companies violating antitrust laws. They opposed imperialism. They insisted upon independence for the Philippines, and they opposed the protective tariff. Remember, the Republicans believing that the protective tariff was necessary for businesses, while the Democrats believed the protective tariff was hurting American workers. The platform also favors strict enforcement of the 8-hour workday, construction of a Panama Canal, the direct election of senators, statehood for the Western Territories, the extermination of polygamy, reciprocal trade agreements, cuts in the Army, and enforcement of the civil service laws. It also condemned the Teddy Roosevelt administration. I'm going to say FDR, we ain't there yet, but It condemned the Teddy Roosevelt administration in general as spasmodic, erratic, sensational, spectacular, and arbitrary. Now that we have a Republican ticket of Teddy Roosevelt and Charles Fairbanks, and the Democratic ticket of Parker and Davis, let's get to the campaigning and let's see who's going to win this thing. Now, unlike the last two elections, the campaigning is really not that vigorous. The campaign season was pervaded by goodwill, and it went a long way toward mending the damage done by the previous class war elections. This was due to the fact that Parker and Roosevelt, with the exception of charisma, were so similar in political outlook. So close were the two candidates that few differences could be detected. Both men were for the gold standard. Though the Democrats were more outspokenly against imperialism, both believed in fair treatment for the Filipinos and eventual liberation, and both believed that labor unions had the same rights as individuals before the courts. The radicals in the Democratic Party denounced Parker as a conservative, while the conservatives in the Republican Party denounced Teddy Roosevelt as a radical. But during the campaign, there were a couple of instances in which Teddy Roosevelt was seen as vulnerable. In the first place, Joseph Pulitzer's New York World carried a full-page story about alleged corruption in the Bureau of Corporations. President Roosevelt admitted certain payments had been made but denied any blackmail. Secondly, in appointing George B. Cortelyou as his campaign manager, Roosevelt had purposefully used his former Secretary of Commerce and Labor. This was of importance because Cortelyou, knowing the secrets of the corporations, could extract large contributions for them. The charge created quite a stir, and in later years was proven to be sound. Now in 1907, it was disclosed that the insurance companies had contributed rather too heavily to the Roosevelt campaign. Only a week before the election, Roosevelt himself called E.H. Harriman, the Railroad King, to Washington for the purpose of raising funds to carry New York. But insider money, however, was spent on both candidates. Parker received financial support from the Morgan banking interests, just as Cleveland had before him. Thomas W. Lawson, the Boston millionaire, charged that New York State Senator Patrick Henry McCarran, who brought out Judge Parker for the nomination, was on the payroll of Standard Oil as political master mechanic at $20,000 a year. He also claimed that Parker was the chosen tool of Standard Oil. Lawson offered Senator McCarran $100,000 if he would disprove the charge. According to one account, no denial of the charge was ever made by the senator. One paper even referred to McCarran as the Standard Oil serpent of Brooklyn politics. Now, with the campaign over with, let's see who wins this thing. This is going to be pretty much a drumbling for the Republicans. Teddy Roosevelt is easily going to win a term of his own. 336 electoral votes for Teddy Roosevelt, 140 for Alton Parker. 32 states are carried by Teddy Roosevelt, only 13 for Mr. Parker. Alton Parker's support, aside from Maryland and Kentucky, does not leave that solid South. And Missouri is carried by a Republican for the first time since 1868. So they end up leaving that solid South and become a bellwether swing state thereafter. In terms of the popular vote, it is 56.4% for Teddy Roosevelt, 37.6% for Mr. Parker. So this is pretty much a landslide win for Teddy Roosevelt, and he wins his own term. Coming up next time is the election of 1908, which two new candidates will be vying for the White House. Until then, I hope you have an excellent day, and we will see you the next time.